The burn on my thumb throbbed with each step, a reminder of the seared steak that had spat oil at me 6 hours ago. My feet had gone numb somewhere around hour 10. Now they just moved on autopilot, carrying me down the familiar hallway. All I could think about was the silence waiting for me. The weight of my apartment key in my pocket felt like a promise. One glass of wine, maybe two, then sleep. Just blessed, uninterrupted sleep. The hallway smelled like it always did. Someone's dinner cooking, old carpet, the faint mustiness that never quite left. But tonight, it smelled like home, like sanctuary. My feet dragged across the apartment hallway carpet. I fumbled for my keys in the dark. I had just finished a 12-hour double shift at Westfield Grill. My back ached. My chef's coat reeked of fryer oil. All I wanted was to rest in the silence of my own room. But before I could even insert the key into the lock, I heard it. Laughter. The clinking of glasses. I froze. The key hung in midair. Someone was inside my apartment. The key clicked as it turned. I pushed the door open. My stomach dropped. 6 strangers sat sprawled across my living room sofa, drinks in hand. A small Bluetooth speaker blared music at full volume. And beyond them, in the open kitchen, I could see my sanctuary. It had been ransacked. Daphne. A voice cut through the chaos. My sister Lillian bounced toward me, wine glass in hand, grinning. The liquid sloshed dangerously close to the rim. You're home too early. Too early? It was almost midnight. I stood there, speechless. Then I walked toward the kitchen, the space I had once kept meticulously organized. Wine bottles lay scattered across the counter. Someone had used my hand-forged Japanese sentoku knife to cut lines. Right on my favorite stone countertop, the blade was deeply scratched. My cast-iron skillet, the one I'd been seasoning carefully for 3 years, was submerged in the sink, soaking in soapy water. What did you do? My voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. What would you do if your family destroyed your sanctuary? Drop a comment below. And if you're enjoying this, hit that like button. My name is Daphne Miller. I'm 29 years old. I work as a cook at Westfield Grill. I'm always in the corner of the kitchen, quietly working my knife, executing the head chef's orders with precision. I don't have any special talent, but when I'm surrounded by the sounds and smells of cooking, that's when I feel truly alive. Ever since I was a child, people called me responsible and patient. Those words sounded like compliments, but they were also a curse that taught me to suppress my emotions. I was always the calmest one in the family. Whenever my sister Lillian did something, I was the one who cleaned up after her. Still, I thought my family was proud of me. Tonight, when I came home from work, I expected a quiet room to welcome me. I never doubted it. The elevator numbers climbed slowly, floor by floor. My legs, exhausted from standing for 12 hours, knew they were finally nearing the end. In the kitchen at Westfield Grill, the smell of oil, the heat of the griddle, even the sense of time itself gets stripped away. My white chef's coat was no longer white. It was covered in patterns of sauce and char. But I loved cooking. The combination of flavors, the transformation of aromas, the way one adjustment of heat could change everything. For that, I came to the kitchen earlier than anyone and left later than anyone, every single day. When I stepped into the hallway, the night air felt strangely light. The city lights blurred in the humid night air. Neon signs illuminated the asphalt, giving off a smell like rain. I walked slowly down the empty sidewalk. Exhaustion and relief washed over me at the same time. Tonight, I thought I could finally sleep without thinking. Silence is heavier than sound, until it's broken. Until that moment, I lived inside a thin membrane called peace. My footsteps after the shift were heavy as lead, but my heart floated with one simple thought. I can finally go home. I reached for the apartment doorknob, searched for my keys. Just a little longer, and I'd be wrapped in silence. No one to disturb me. Just one glass of wine, then sleep. That was all I wished for. But what reached my ears was the clinking of glasses and the laughter of multiple voices. My fingertips froze. The laughter was definitely coming from inside my room. I checked the apartment number. No mistake. The metal in the keyhole felt cold against my hand. I turned it slowly. With a click, The sound of my small world shattering echoed through the air. The moment I pushed the door open, something in my chest sank. 6 men and women, all strangers, lounged in my living room, laughing, drinks in hand. The speaker pounded with bass. Chips and bottles littered the table. Coasters scattered everywhere. Beyond the living room, I could see the kitchen. My heart, it was in ruins. Daphne. A high-pitched voice cut through the music. Just hearing it made my head hurt. My sister, Lillian. Wine glass in one hand, an innocent smile on her face as she approached. "You're home too early." I glanced at the clock instinctively. 11:54 at night. How was this early? Behind her, someone tossed a pizza box. The smell of cheese mixed with the stench of oil. My stomach twisted. I said nothing and walked toward the kitchen. There, I saw the traces of destruction. Wine bottles rolling, corks scattered on the floor. Someone had used my hand-forged Sentoku knife to cut limes on my favorite stone countertop. The blade had deep scratches running across it, reflecting the light deli. In the spice rack, the bottle of saffron I had treasured lay toppled. Golden threads of spice scattered across the floor. I knelt down and tried to pick them up with my fingers, but my hands were shaking. I couldn't grasp them. I looked into the sink. My cast iron skillet was submerged in foam. I had spent 3 years oiling it, layering it, nurturing it to prevent sticking. Now the foaming detergent seemed to dissolve all that effort. "What did you do?" The voice from my throat was barely breathing. "What do you mean?" "A party. We were just having fun," Lillian said with a laugh, draining her wine. "Don't be so angry. We are family, aren't we?" That word stung faintly in my ears. Family. My eyes shifted to the corner of the counter. My grandmother's handwritten recipe book was soaked in wine. The pages were warped, stained red. The ink was bleeding. The letters were fading. It was the only keepsake my grandmother had left me. In that moment, memories came flooding back. 6 months ago, my parents asked me for a spare key. They said it was for emergencies. At first, I refused. But then my father sighed and said, "Don't you trust your family?" That sentence bound me that day. The moment I handed over the key, I felt a little relieved, because I believed my family wouldn't do anything bad. But it turned out to be an invasion permit, in the name of the family. 3 weeks later, I came home from a night shift and found Lillian asleep on my sofa. "I didn't have a place to stay, just for a bit," she said with a laugh. That was the beginning. Night after night, she came and opened my fridge. My expensive vanilla beans disappeared. My aged balsamic vinegar vanished. I told myself I was lending them, but in reality, I was being robbed continuously. Tonight, that accumulation collapsed with a loud crash. I stood up and raised my voice. "Everyone, get out." Lillian's friends looked between me and her. "Huh? It's only 11. Get out." This time, quietly, but with an unwavering voice. The air changed at the hardness of that sound. The men put down their glasses and reluctantly stood. One of them tried to walk out with a wine bottle. In that instant, I reached out and took it from him. I said nothing. Words weren't necessary. "What's your problem? Why are you acting like this?" Lillian pulled out her phone and started tapping. "I'm calling Mom and Dad." At those words, past scenes flashed through my mind. Her breaking something, pretending to cry. I apologize. My parents blamed me with, "You're the older sister." Always the same ending. But today was different. At the edge of my vision, I saw the broken knife handle. On the day I graduated from culinary school, my mentor Thomas had said something. "A cook's knife is their voice. If you lose it, you lose yourself." I picked up that knife. The texture of the cracked handle forced reality upon me. If I stayed silent now, my voice would be taken from me again. "Go ahead. But when that call is over, you're leaving too." Lillian lost her words. Her smile vanished. Her eyebrows twitched slightly. "You can't kick me out. I'm your sister. Watch me." I opened the door and gently pushed her arm. Cold air flowed in. The cold wind pushed out the smell of oil and alcohol. The moment I closed the door, something burst inside my chest. Silence spread with a sound. The wall clock's second hand ticked forward, one beat at a time. It sounded like the rhythm of freedom. I took a deep breath. Not the smell of burned oil, just my own air. That night, I finally understood. Taking back your key means taking back your voice. A week later, on a Sunday afternoon, I read my mother's message 3 times. Come for dinner. The words family meeting weren't there, which somehow made me more anxious. But if I declined, I'd be called cold or ungrateful again. In the end, I started the car engine. When I opened the front door of my parents' house, the familiar smell of pot roast tickled my nose. Mixed with that smell was a faint scent of tension. My mother always made this dish when she had a favor to ask. Daphne, perfect timing. My mother appeared in her apron. Her smile was perfect, but behind it, I could see purpose. Lillian's already here. My mother's smile had a strange power. It felt like an embrace, but at the same time, it was a chain that wouldn't let you go. In front of that smile, my childhood self resurfaced. No matter how much I resisted, I always ended up saying, I'm sorry. That's small for me. The smell of pot roast brought nostalgia and suffocation at the same time. At the family dinner table, at that stage, I was once again given the role of the obedient one. I entered the living room. My sister was on the sofa as usual, scrolling on her phone. Without even looking up, she muttered, "Hey," as if the incident from the other night had never happened. In the corner of the living room stood my Aunt Margaret, my mother's older sister. She used to be a tailor in her youth. She was always invited to family gatherings, but she spoke little. She would sit quietly and watch the table with eyes that seemed to see through everything. Ever since I was a child, her silence carried the air of someone who knows the truth. My father sat at the dining table, red wine in hand, his mouth corners lifted in a polished, salesman-like smile. Perfect. Sit down. I took my usual seat, the same position I'd sat in since childhood. A thick manila folder already lay on the table. A bad feeling. Actually, we have great news, my mother said, serving pot roast. A chance to make even better use of your cooking talent. My father nodded. We're thinking of running a restaurant as a family. You're cooking, supported by Lillian's business skills. Restaurant. The word caught in my throat. My father opened the folder and spread documents across the table. We already have a location picked out. We registered the business opening under your name. Under my name? My voice trembled low. You're a cook, so we need your name as chef. But Lillian will handle management. Everyone does what they're good at. My mother smiled as she poured wine. This will truly be a family restaurant. Lillian finally looked up and held out her phone. I put together some interior design ideas on a sharing site. We named it our restaurant. Isn't it cute? The screen showed a cafe-style design in white and gold. Pink neon letters spelled out Lillian's table. My name was nowhere to be found. When did you decide this? About 4 months ago, Lillian said casually. I've been planning it with Mom and Dad. I'm so happy I can finally tell you. But I didn't know anything about this. It's called a surprise, my father laughed. Making a family dream come true, isn't that great? Beneath that smile lurked the shadow of control. I knew it well. My father's dreams had always been built on someone's sacrifice. My mother added, only your skills can make this happen. But Lillian is better suited for management. She's so social. Fair, right? Said my father. The word fair rang like an icy blade. I quietly folded my napkin. I need time to think about this. Think? You'll be working for your family. Or do you want to struggle alone again? The word again stabbed something inside me. I stood up, took a deep breath. I'm going home tonight. Daphne. My mother's voice chased after me, but I didn't look back. When I opened the door, a cold night wind hit my cheeks. Moonlight reflected off the car hood, dazzling. Suddenly, a voice came from behind. Wait, Daphne. I turned around. Aunt Margaret stood there, my mother's older sister, someone who rarely spoke up. Want to walk a bit? I walked alongside her down the road in front of the house. The streetlights in the quiet residential area slowly passed behind us. You must be shocked. That proposal, Margaret said in a gentle voice. They've been planning it for a long time, using your name. Did everyone know? Yes. Unfortunately, your mother has always been like that. She once took a dress I made and told people at school it was her own creation. Margaret gave a bitter smile. History repeats itself, especially within families. I looked up at the night sky in silence. A single star glowed coldly. Your talent doesn't exist for that house. Protect it properly. But how? You escape. Quietly but surely. Her voice carried the weight of experience. Go to a place where you can serve the food you made, under your own name. The wind blew. It felt like a push at my back. That night, I realized for the first time that the words family bonds could also become a curse. When I got back to the car, a message arrived on my phone. From my father. Daphne, running away is pointless. Your name is on the contract. Cooperate for the family. I stared at the screen and exhaled deeply. Because I grew up in that house, I knew. No phrase binds people more conveniently than for the family. I didn't reply. I started the engine. Into the darkness of the night. Toward an unseen future. The fingertips gripping the steering wheel trembled just a little. 2 days later, in the morning, light from the window dyed the still sleeping city gold. 2 days had passed since that family meeting. I still couldn't forget the texture of those documents on the table. The rough feel of paper remained on my fingertips like shackles. In the morning, my phone vibrated. My father's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring without answering. I knew if I picked up, his voice would wrap around me like chains. On the way to work, I stopped in front of a small bakery. Through the glass, I could see rows of freshly baked bread, the golden crusts and soft steam rising. It was the kind of scene that made you think about simple happiness. As I stood there, an old memory surfaced. My grandmother once told me, Daphne, cooking isn't about following someone else's recipe. It's about listening to the voices of the ingredients and speaking your own truth. That day, I finally understood what she meant. That evening, as I walked back to my apartment, I passed a high-end restaurant called Ember. I stopped without meaning to. Through the wide glass windows, the kitchen was alive. Chefs moved like dancers. Their hands worked in perfect rhythm. White coats, pristine and proud. Steam rose in elegant columns. The past was organized, beautiful, and purposeful. Everything I dreamed of. I pressed closer to the glass. My reflection stared back at me. Oil-stained coat, dark circles under my eyes. I looked like someone who'd given up. Maybe I had. I turned to leave. That's when I heard it. Daphne Miller? The voice froze me in place. I knew that voice. A man in a chef's coat stepped out of the restaurant. Tall, silver at his temples, eyes that saw everything. He looked at me, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Then something else. Concern, maybe. Or disappointment. I'm Thomas Anderson. He said it gently, like he was talking to someone fragile. I was your instructor at culinary school. I've heard you're working at Westfield Grill. Thomas, the mentor who had taught me the value of a knife, the one who told me I had potential. That was 7 years ago, before I learned to make myself small. Yes, I stammered. Heat crept up my neck. He was seeing me at my worst, but he didn't look away. Instead, he pulled out a card. Hold it between 2 fingers. I'm the head chef here at Ember. We're looking for a new sous chef. He pressed the card into my palm. If you're interested, come by tomorrow morning. 8 sharp. Then he smiled. A real smile. I remember your final exam dish. That miso glazed cod. You understood something most students never do. What's that? My voice barely worked. That cooking is conversation, not performance. He nodded toward the restaurant. I could use someone who remembers that. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning Thomas's business card over in my hands. The restaurant name Ember was embossed in gold letters. Ember. Fire. The thing that transforms ingredients. The force that creates new flavors. Could I really work there? Could I finally use my skills for myself instead of for someone else's expectations? Morning came. I dressed carefully and headed to Ember. Thomas welcomed me with a firm handshake. Let's talk about what you can bring to this kitchen. The interview lasted an hour. We talked about flavor profiles, kitchen management, and creative freedom. Thomas listened to every word I said. He asked my opinion. He respected my vision. At the end, he said something that changed everything. Daphne, I don't need someone who just follows orders. I need someone who can create their own voice through food. Are you ready to do that? I thought of my cast iron skillet, ruined in soapy water. I thought of my grandmother's recipe book, stained with wine. I thought of all the years I'd spent cooking for people who never tasted what I made. Yes, I said. I'm ready. The next day, Lillian showed up at my apartment again. This time, she knocked. At least she had that much sense. We need to talk about the restaurant funding. We're going to apply using your credit information, she said. Lillian. My voice hardened for the first time in a long time. I'm not involved anymore. She laughed it off. You always say that. Even when you get really angry, you end up helping anyway, right? Not anymore. I pulled out my phone and showed her the email from Thomas. I'm going to work at Ember as head chef. In an instant, the color drained from her face. You're joking, right? I'm serious. Her lips trembled. What about our restaurant? I already talked to investors. That's your restaurant. I have nothing to do with it. Silence. That quiet spoke of the weight of all the years that had piled up between us. That night, I called Aunt Margaret. You finally started walking your own path, she said. Her voice was warm. But don't let your guard down. That house doesn't let people go easily. Margaret had been supposed to inherit the family tailoring shop long ago, but my mother had insisted women can't handle management. Instead, my uncle, my father, took over the shop. Still, Margaret had quietly continued holding her needle. If you don't use your voice, the sound of the needle will scream for you, she'd once told me. I still remember those words. Outside the window, wind shook the trees, but I breathed deeply from the bottom of my heart for the first time in a long while. It smelled like freedom. The morning of the contract, a quiet air carried the premonition of resolve. 3 days had passed since the interview at Ember. The contract papers still lay on my desk, as if holding their breath, waiting for my decision. If I signed, my life would change. But at the same time, it would mean a complete break from my family. Both scared me. The next morning, calls had piled up on my phone. 10 from my father, 6 from my mother, 24 from Lillian. They all said the same thing. Let's talk. You're misunderstanding. We'll all succeed together. What seeped through those messages wasn't reconciliation. It was control. On my way to work, I called Aunt Margaret. The calls won't stop. She sighed. As expected, when that house doesn't get its way, it always applies pressure. What should I do? Create an escape route. Draw a line in writing, not with words. Protect yourself with evidence. With Margaret's words in my heart, I headed to Ember's office. In the glass-walled conference room, Valerie spread out the contract. This is the formal offer. Thomas trusts you, she said. Her voice was calm, yet carried a professional tension. As I read through the contract, my heartbeat quickened. Salary, work hours, menu development discretion, and one line, Chef Daphne Miller, to be named as head chef. My name was there, unlike my father's documents, a reality that could only be established with my own signature. My hand trembled as I reached for the pen. Pen in hand, I glanced out the window. Gray clouds drifted by. The world beyond the glass was still. If I signed this contract, my relationship with my family would change completely. Still, I'd rather choose pain than repeat that same night again. People aren't born to support someone else's dreams. We are born to live with our own voices. The moment the pen touched the paper, the trembling in my hand stopped. That thin line was like a boundary separating my past from my present. For the few seconds it took the ink to dry, silence so deep I couldn't breathe. Still, deep in my chest, I clearly felt that something had begun. At that moment, my phone vibrated. Lillian's name appeared on the screen. I had a bad feeling, but I couldn't ignore it. When I answered, her voice was a mix of anger and tears. What's going on? You really met with Thomas Anderson? Mom and Dad are in shock. It's true, I answered briefly. I decided to work at Ember. Traitor? Lillian's voice shook. You ruined everything. I already talked to the bank people. What am I supposed to do now? I looked back at the contract. That's your problem. Lillian's crying grew distant, and eventually the call ended. Valerie said quietly, Are you worried about your family? I shook my head. I'm done living for my family. The sound of pressing pen to paper echoed in my heart. By the time the ink finished drawing the line, a certain warmth had lit up inside my chest. When the contract was finished, Thomas appeared. Congratulations, Daphne. You can express your own flavors here now. At those words, Tears suddenly welled up. When was the last time I felt recognized by someone? My father's good work had always been tainted with calculation. My mother's, I'm proud, had always been directed toward Lillian's shadow. But now, Thomas's words reached me directly. The next morning, I walked through the city before dawn. The sky was gray, breath rose white. As I straightened the collar of my chef's coat, I felt a small flame in my chest. In front of Ember, the golden logo glowed quietly. When I pushed open the door, the sweet smell of bread and butter greeted me. In the kitchen, staff were already silently preparing. The sound of cutting boards, the crackle of oil, and above all, an air like orderly music without panic or shouting. "Miller, you're here." Thomas's low voice. His fingertip pointed to a new workstation. Stainless steel polished and reflecting light. "This is your station. You control the heat." The trust embedded in those short words was the warmest welcome. My fingertips trembled. Not from fear. It was proof of resolve. My first service day. The kitchen air was taut. The sound of fire, metal clashing, the aroma of spices. Everything stimulated the nerves in my fingertips. "Sauce next." Thomas's voice flew. I nodded and tilted the pan, careful not to burn, but to draw out maximum aroma, conversing with the flame. In that instant, Thomas smiled faintly. "That's it, Daphne. You've grasped the breath of fire." Something burst quietly inside my chest. The feeling of being recognized spread through my core. That night, I did my first test preparation in Ember's kitchen. At the edge of the frying pan, golden oil swayed. The surface of the scallop took on a sear and began to glow. Yuzu zest popped over the oil, sparking like little fireworks. Butter foam sank with a sound, and the scent of lemongrass rose. The savory aroma of scallops layered with the lightness of lemongrass. Through the steam, my past self seemed to smile for just a moment. This is my sound. No one can take it from me. A quiet flame illuminated the person I am now. The next day, 7 in the morning, as I was about to leave, a cardboard box sat in the hallway. Inside was a package from my mother. An envelope contained a letter. "To Daphne, your decision is sad, but we're family. The restaurant plans are already moving forward. We need you. Your father is sorry. Come back." At the end of the letter was a copy of a contract with the words, "Please sign." As if trampling on my resolve, I folded the letter and quietly dropped it into the kitchen trash. No need to burn it. In my heart, it had already burned away. That night, Margaret called. "What will you do?" "They're still moving. They went to the bank." "I know. You're going to fight." "Not fight. Acclaim. My name." Margaret breathed quietly on the other end. "You're strong. But that's not something you were born with. You endured. You watched. You learned. And finally you arrived at that strength." Those words brought me close to tears. When I was young, I tried to leave that house too, but no one helped me. They laughed and said women shouldn't have dreams. That's why I'm proud of where you're standing now. Her voice was gentle, yet urgent. The baton of freedom, passed after so many years, felt like it was being handed to me through the phone. With a copy of the contract still on my desk, I stood by the window. The city at night breathed quietly. Lights from distant buildings flickered like countless heartbeats. The night I left that house, I walked just to escape. But now it's different. What I found beyond that escape, I now understand, is the path to living. Outside, wind rustled the curtains. Papers on the desk made a small sound. It was the sound of a page from the past that would never return, closing. At that moment, thunder rumbled in the distance. Outside the window, lightning tore through the clouds. The flash of lightning outside split the night sky deeply. For that instant, the world was painted white. Light reflected in the glass window illuminated my cheek. The past self that had clung like a shadow began to fade. The thunder rumbled slightly later from deep in the city. That low sound seemed to wash away the fear inside my chest. What had sounded like destruction now felt like a signal of rebirth. The storm is not fear. It's a rite of passage to break the old shell and let new light through. Outside, the trees rustled. Wind passed through the gaps between houses. In that flow, I could faintly smell freedom, light announcing the beginning of a new season. Watching it, I exhaled softly. Tomorrow begins in Ember's kitchen, using fire, listening to sound, creating taste. In that repetition, I am finally reclaiming my own life. Late at night, my phone screen lit up. Notifications lined up like ghosts of the past. Long messages from my mother kept coming. I only want your happiness. Don't misunderstand. Your father is tired too. They all began with gentle words, but they always ended with, for the family. As I read, the inside of my chest grew cold. I used to be saved by those words, but now I understand what kind of chains they were. My finger stopped. The cursor in the reply box blinked at the same rhythm as my heartbeat. I started typing, "I'm sorry," then deleted it. I typed, "Thank you," then deleted it again. I couldn't find the words. Eventually, I set down my phone, slowly closed my eyes. In the silence, I thought I heard the sound of sharpening a knife. That sound felt like a signpost leading me back to my own life. Even late into the night, the fire in my chest didn't go out. If I were the me from when I lived in that house, I would have been too scared and run away. But now, gripping my knife, I think, I don't need anyone's permission anymore. I'm the one who cooks my own life. 1 month after I started working at Ember, the morning kitchen was flooded with sound. The dry sound of knives hitting cutting boards, steam rising from pots, Thomas's short instructions, and the staff's breath perfectly synchronized. I felt my own heartbeat dissolve into that rhythm. I was living here, not according to others' expectations, but my own hand movements shaping the future directly. When the lunch peak passed, the kitchen air relaxed. Through the steam, Thomas stood. "Your new menu is getting great reviews," he said with a light laugh, handing me a note. Printed on it, Daphne's signature dish, scallop and yuzu. My chest warmed. A moment when my name was given, not taken. That night, when I returned home, an envelope was in the mailbox. From my mother. The corner of the envelope was damp. It smelled not like a letter, but like pressure. "Daphne, we need your name on the contract. Your father isn't blaming you. Lillian is sorry too. Think it over again for the family." Below the letter, a small printed text caught my eye. Consent form, Miller Family Restaurant. I quietly placed the letter on the table. Outside the window, streetlight flickered in the night breeze. To that blinking rhythm, everything that had happened played out in my mind, surfacing and fading one by one. Lillian's laughter. Grandmother's recipe book. Father's, "Don't you trust your family?" Mother's, "I'm saying this for your sake." They were all gentle cages meant to confine me. I opened the fridge. Inside were scallops, lemongrass, and yuzu zest. I arranged the ingredients on the cutting board and gripped my knife. The blade gleamed in the light. This was no longer a broken knife. It was my voice, melted from that night's pain and sharpened anew. The sound of chopping echoed through the room. I lit the fire. The frying pan heated up. Butter melted. Aroma rose. The scallops sizzled in the frying pan. That sound awakened distant memories. The day my grandmother first taught me to cook. She'd laughed and said, "The smell right before it burns is the most delicious moment." Yuzu zest popped. Layers of sweetness and acidity spread throughout the room. The aroma reversed time, slowly healing past wounds. Lemongrass green dissolved into the steam. Golden scallops took on a seared crust. I watched and set down the knife. I lowered the heat. The sound settled. The kitchen felt like one small universe. In a place where no one's voice could reach, I finally heard my own. I understood. Cooking is not a battle. It's forgiveness. Cooking is also the alchemy of healing, transforming pain into heat, into aroma, so that people can finally face forward. Cooking is not a symbol of control, but of sharing. It doesn't exist to bind someone. It exists to share freedom. I placed the finished dish on the table, gently set it on top of my grandmother's recipe book. Beyond the burned, smudged letters, I felt I could see new pages showing through. That night, my father called. On the other end, a low voice echoed, "Daphne, think it over one more time. You're a member of this family." I answered quietly. Family isn't something built on someone's sacrifice. I finally understand that now. Silence. After a long silence, I heard my father exhale softly. "Do what you want." The moment I heard those words, tears fell. Not because I was forgiven, but because I had finally forgiven myself. The next morning, I finished a new dish in Ember's kitchen. Its name, Recipe for Freedom. The kitchen was quiet, just me and the early light filtering through the windows. I'd come in 2 hours before anyone else. I needed this moment alone. I placed a scallop in the center of the plate. My hands were steady now. No trembling, no fear. The yuzu sauce spiraled outward from the center, gold meeting white. That shape was like a trajectory dissolving and sublimating past pain. As I drew the final curve, I heard it, her voice. The most beautiful food. My grandmother whispered from somewhere in my memory, is the food you make for yourself first. My vision blurred. A tear fell. It landed on the edge of the plate, catching the light. I didn't wipe it away. I let it fall. The first tear I'd cried for myself in years. Not for guilt, not for shame. Just for the girl who'd finally come home to herself. Outside the window, dawn was breaking. Orange light spilled across the city. It mixed with the blue flame beneath my pan, creating something new, something that belonged only to this moment. I picked up the plate, hold it up to the light. The scallop gleamed. The sauce shimmered. This is my declaration. I whispered to the empty kitchen. This plate, this moment, this is mine. Somewhere in the city, my phone was probably buzzing. Messages from my mother, voicemails from my father. But here, in this kitchen, in this light, none of that could touch me. I set the plate down carefully, gazed at it one more time. Gazing at the plate, I smiled quietly. Cooking is my voice. Somewhere in this world, someone whose voice was taken like mine once might eat this and stand up one day. The fire still burned quietly. The flickering flame moved shadows on the wall. That rhythm seemed to overlap with the beating of my heart. No words were needed. This silence was the sound that spoke of who I am now. When the lunch service ended, a young pastry chef named Alice spoke to me. Chef, today's scallop sauté. The aroma was so delicate. Thank you, but it's still in the testing phase. No, I won't forget that aroma. That one sentence made my chest warm. Once, even when I cooked for my family, no one tried to taste it. Now, for the first time, it had reached someone. The person in front of me. Directly. Thomas appeared from the back. Your cooking doesn't speak through taste. It speaks through aroma, he said with a laugh, patting my shoulder lightly. That warmth made the loneliness of that night fade a little more. In the back of the kitchen, steam from a pot wavered. Sounds layered. A rhythm took shape. It was the sound of living. I had finally grasped. Every day spent in Ember's kitchen felt as clear as being reborn. The sound of knives, the resonance of pots, the aroma of ingredients. Each one breathed as proof that I was alive. Sometimes, I see my old self overlapping. The me who worked in fear and obedience back then. But now, even holding the same knife, that blade belongs to no one else. It's my own voice. I took a deep breath. Air filled my chest. A sensation like a door that had been closed for so long was quietly opening. Finally, my breathing became my own. In the corner of the kitchen, I stood still for a while. Outside the window, thin light before dawn blurred. In the time when the city was still asleep, only the metallic sound of the frying pan quietly hammered at the future. I once believed that living meant being recognized by family, but now it's different. With just one plate, I can speak about myself in words that no one can take away. The color of the fire changes. Aroma rises. That small accumulation of changes shapes my tomorrow. That alone felt like enough. The fire burned again, but no longer for someone else. It was proof of my own life. Daphne chose freedom over obligation. Have you ever reclaimed what was taken from you? Share your story in the comments. If this inspired you, subscribe and hit the bell for more stories of quiet strength.